Management and leadership. The most important question, I think, in any business is what is the difference between a manager and a leader? So there's a lot of theories around this, but we need to go by the syllabus and basically what it is that you need to convince the marker of that you have a good understanding of the knowledge and can apply it. That's very important. So, is a manager necessarily a leader, and is a leader necessarily a manager? To understand that, we have to have a look at the words of efficiency and effectiveness. So, we had a discussion in class today around a prickly pear. Now, a prickly pear is a type of a kiwi fruit that grows wild on a cactus, and it's got all these little thorns on it, and very difficult to peel that fruit in order to get to the juicy fruit on the inside. Now, how would one effectively and efficiently peel that prickly pear? Well, it's quite simple. If you just chop it in half, one of the students says, no, their grandmother chops it into four, and then you can hold the prickly side on the one side and you can just scoop out the fruit that way. That's quite an efficient and effective way of doing it. The whole purpose of this being effective is that we want to be able to get all the prickly pear, not waste anything in the process of um, peeling off the skin and, of course, not getting stuck by the thorns. So, very good analogy of what's the difference between a prickly pear, the difference between effectiveness and efficiency. And very often, leaders are very effective in what they do, and good managers are very efficient. So, think of a production line packing apples, for example. These guys are pulling the good apples and they pack good apples in a very efficient way, and it doesn't matter how much faster the machine goes or the packers go, you reached a maximum level of efficiency. The effectiveness would be making sure that they're picking out all the good apples, making sure that the quality of the fruit is there and there isn't a problem with that. Right, so very easy introduction into management and very easy to recognize a business that's doing poorly if it's not being efficient. Good. So managers get things done. They're not the workers necessarily, but sometimes having climbed the rank of manager, they would have been doing the work themselves or they understood very clearly how the work gets done. So a manager is responsible for setting the objectives, organizing resources, and motivating staff so that the organization's aims are met: goals, purpose, vision, and mission. Right, so in a little bit of more detail, there are 5 basic functions a manager must perform: setting objectives, as we have discussed, organizing the resources to meet these objectives, directing and motivating the staff in order that the directives get met, and of course, coordinating the day-to-day activities and making sure, like, for example, spending money on the right activities so that the goals of the business get achieved. But this is where most managers fall flat, is they neglect the control and they're unable to measure the performance against the targets, not necessarily financial, but also the non-financial targets as well, production and things moving forward. Okay, so that's the function of a manager. What is the role of a manager? A manager has many roles, but basically divided into 3 areas. It has an interpersonal role, informational role, and decision roles. Most people think that managers are just there to make decisions and take control, but that's not always the case. So let's jump quickly to table 10.1 and we'll come back to that very important paragraph there about a leader. Now, in the interpersonal role, a manager could be a figurehead, a leader, and a liaison, and sometimes we get different people that can perform those functions. They perform informational roles, they are monitors, disseminators, and spokespersons for the company, and like the White House example, there's just too much to do for one manager being the president, so they bring in different people to fulfill those different roles. A manager is also a decisional role. He can be an entrepreneur, he can be a disturbance manager, a handler, or a conflict manager, very often with conflict between staff and the objectives of the company. We were talking about Let's say BMW bring out, or any other car manufacturer brings out a brand new vehicle, and something goes wrong. There's maybe a reclaim on the seatbelts, and that whole vehicle line has to be reclaimed and refitted. And they obviously have production issues, so that's going to slow down the production. And now the staff are working overtime. Now, how do they manage and keep all of that together and make sure that they don't make mistakes? The workers working too hard, falling asleep on the job, making more and more mistakes, the thing just gets out of hand. So sometimes the conflict between what the business wants and where the employees are, not that they don't want to work, but they just can't. They're at full capacity. So maybe they have to train up some other skilled laborers. So conflict manager comes in. Resource allocator, a manager does that as well. And very often managers have to negotiate with important um, aspects of the micro and macro environment. But let's come back to this very important topic over here. What is a leader? A leader is a key part of being a successful manager. It involves setting clear direction and vision of an organization, often a new direction or a vision of circumstance that demands it. Sometimes you've got to change direction. Good leaders are able to do that and get people to follow them. Employees want to follow a good leader. It's in our nature, it's in our basic makeup. What why do they want to follow? Because they obviously respond positively and they are ignited with some sort of passion. And something just clicks into place, and a good leader will often inspire employees to do what the organization wants. A poor leader will not be able to win over staff and will obviously not be able to communicate. I think one of the most important aspects of a good leader is their communication skills. If you can't communicate, sorry pal or lady, you won't be able to be a good leader. You might still be a good manager, but you won't be a good leader. So the best managers are also good leaders, but some managers are not. Managers that focus too much on control and allocation of resources, being people as well, they can fail at providing that sense of purpose, that glowingness inside the individuals to want to do what the business wants them to do, or to get the business moving, the machine. So without a clear, charismatic leadership, workers may or be very well managed, but they're not inspired. So leaders need to be able to inspire the workers so that they can take on the fresh direction or just achieve what the goals of the business are or have already been allocated. Right, so for homework was 10.1. I'm not going to go through that. Very easy activity there. And what we do want to just quickly touch on is the difference between the different leadership styles. There are 4 leadership styles, mainly autocratic, democratic, paternalistic, and laissez-faire. So we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. Autocratic leadership keeps the decision making at the center of the organization or at the top of the organization. There's a lot of structure, so sometimes that demotivates staff who want to contribute and want to be able to be part of that decision making process. So the staff aren't involved at all. But sometimes in a production line, you need to have that autocratic leadership. Gives you full information to staff. Supervisors work closely together, and it needs to be a well-oiled machine. Right, and possible applications: defense force, police, and also when there's a crisis, you need to make decisive actions. You don't want to have too many people involved in the process. Democratic, on the other hand, is when there's a lot of participation with staff, supervisors, managers, etc. There's encouraged to have two-way communication between the staff, workers, and information. The business will allow full involvement of the staff. It's a consultation time consuming approach. That's the main disadvantage. On occasion, there's a quick decision making is required. This is not advised. The level of involvement, some issues may be too sensitive. For example, who everybody's being paid and why some people are getting increases, other people aren't. So that gets a bit tricky if you're too democratic. It is useful when businesses need to contribute. So if you're coming up with a new idea and you need to get lots and lots of input and creativity flowing, then it's advised to have that. Also, when there's a lot of experienced staff and you want to have a flexible working style, that's also encouraged. Okay, so we covered all of that. Paternalistic are managers who think they know what's best for the workers. Some consultation will take place, but basically the managers want the workers to be happy, but also to be doing things that are good for them. The disadvantage is some workers will be dissatisfied with the attempts to be consulted and they're not having a feeling of power or influence. Okay, this is used when managers who have genuine concern for workers' interests but feel that the managers know best in the end, when workers are young or inexperienced and they might not have the appropriate style or experience to get the job done. Laissez-faire, these are just really managers that delegate virtually all authority and decision-making powers. So they take no responsibility. Very broad criteria, not a lot of boundaries. The problem with this is employees like to have structure, otherwise they have a loss of security. And then, of course, there's no feedback. So how do they know if they're doing their job well and all of those good things? So laissez-faire can be used when managers are too busy or too lazy to intervene, but may be appropriate for like a research institution when the experts are typically the people on the ground. Excuse me, on the ground. Okay, so that basically covers it for leadership styles. Then for homework, you had to do activity 10.2, cover that. Remember the little key notes in green, and that was it. That was all the homework. What is also for discussion points in the next class would be, is a happy employee a productive employee, or does it matter at all? I just want to take you quickly to the CD that comes with this book. If you look through it, it gives you a different way of looking at the different resources. So for example, if we go to Unit 2, People in Organizations, where we are at the moment, it gives you a revision checklist, mind maps, revision questions, and so forth. So let's just have a quick quiz at what this is all about. So right over here, you can see management and managers. Functions of management, remember those 5 points. Identify and explain the key functions of managers. We haven't gone through Mintzberg yet, but that's a science research that we'll go through in a little bit later. Purpose of a leadership, explain the importance of leadership. We've gone through that. What are the leadership roles? We touched on it very briefly, but let me just go to page 127 and you'll see, there we go. So on page 127, the personal characteristics of a leader are they have a desire to succeed and a natural self-confidence that they will succeed. These are very important points. These 4 points, it is in the exam, so you need to understand this very clearly. The purpose of the ability to think beyond the obvious. They think outside of the box. They're very creative thinkers. They're multi-talented. They understand the discussions about a wide range of issues affecting the business. They're not too they worry about the detail, but they're not too worried about the impact of the detail. So they're bigger picture people. And then finally, they have an incisive mind that enables the hearts of the issues to be identified rather than unnecessary detail. Let's just go back to the previous page as well. No, we've covered it. The roles of the manager. Okay, so that's quite a useful tool. Now, if we didn't have this revision checklist, we wouldn't have been able to remember to go back to that point. So that's when you're studying, use these checklists. They're there for you. Leadership roles. We've pretty much touched on that, but the most important one is the leadership styles. So the 4 different leadership styles. What are the advantages? What are the drawbacks? That's something that needs to be studied. Okay, in the next session, we're going to look at McGregor's theory X and Y, and we'll look at Mintzberg as well. You'll get that at university level 2. And there's one more thing I wanted to show you here, which is the mind maps. Right. So if you click on the mind maps, The mind map is a bit clunky. I'm not really fond of this way of learning, but they've given you some sort of summary there for you that comes with the book. Okay, so we've gone through leadership style: autocratic, democratic, laissez-faire, paternalistic. What are leadership qualities? Self-motivated, creative, multi-talented, incisive minds, and respectful coordinators. They win the hearts of the people. Right, so for homework, 10.1 and 10.2, and then of course don't forget to be ready for your discussion around, is a happy worker a productive worker? Right, thanks for your time. Chat to you soon. Bye.